Hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and we are going to continue our discussion on the OSR, something us old grognards are used to, some old school gaming, sometimes erroneously referred to as rules light, and this was a little bit more of a rant. So buckle up, step up, and please drop your comments if you have any. Uh, if all of you brilliant people out there have some concerns or opinions about this subject. And this one is a little bit more generalized. This isn't specifically the OSR, but this does really deal with rules light systems and the myths surrounding it. And like the little clickbaity thumbnail, we are going to get to into BS detectors and a-hole disseminators and all that kind of stuff. So one thing I wanted to bring up about the OSR and a huge myth about rules light systems, page count not mattering, and the idea that a very simple or simplistic rule system somehow doesn't have any depth or complexity. And I'm about to tell you that that's not actually true. Because what I think a mistake that happens in our tabletop role-playing community is that there's this desire to want to make rules for a game that disrupt bad intentions. It's not only difficult, it's nearly impossible to design a rule system around people who are just assholes and bullshitters. And we are going to discuss how these rules light systems enable us to find people that we just want to game with socially. Yeah. Missed me with what? Like a brick or something? Because I hope I dodged it. No, actually, very simple thing happened that became more complex than it needed to be. All my fault. The wife works from home. She works in fraud, and they enabled a VPN, and we have like software and firewall set up, and the VPN did a disruption, and then and it was just this whole big mess because everything conflicted with each other. Mostly because of my fault. So we ended up not air gapping, but I ended up conflating things that didn't need to be. And as we kept rebooting, and she had to go to her, had to contact her work, and then I'm at work, so I can't do it from while I'm at work. Come back, and all the conflict issues, we settled it out. It's fine. Sorry, but it disrupted a lot of things that didn't need to be disrupted, and so yeah, had to take it back to square one and get it all back up running again. It was like, why isn't it working? And so yeah, it was a mess. It was a big mess. All right, so BS detectors. Okay, one myth about rules light systems is that us all grognards, those of us that love the OSR, we just make things up on the fly. That's a bit of an overreach, because usually this happens in the most complex of games. Usually what happens is all of us at our gaming tables, if you have a game that has a really robust engine to it, whatever the mechanic is, the mechanic could be a dice pool, a D20, it could be 2 paired dice, you could even have randomizers like playing cards or what have you. Usually the default is go back to the engine. What game engine does your game run on? And if we have some kind of one-off situation, something not in the rules, and a unique situation that is not detailed in your 400-page tome, usually it just goes back to the engine. All the rest of it, all the rest of the side rules are extraneous. And in the OSR, we understand that all the rest of it is extraneous. We understand that you don't really need 400 pages for us to understand what an elf is. We don't need a 600-page tome to tell us that you're trying to hit something with a weapon. You are trying to convince a guard to let you pass or something. If the game has a really good engine, most of it is up here in the common sense uh, vacuum that is our brain that we fill with a lot of useless information. And if your rules light system has a good engine, doesn't really need much modification from that. Now, mind you, before games became so robust as they are today, we had a lot of different ways of adjudicating something, from rolling a d6, deciding whether you succeed on a 1, 2, or a 3 or something like that, to percentile systems, to d20 systems, and all the ranges in between. And if you go back far enough in role playing, whole character classes, even themselves, were made up of percentile systems and d20 and rolling 3d6 and dice pools and everything in between. Reaction rolls using 2d6, attributes, using a d20 or using a 3d6 system. Do you roll below or above, and all that kind of stuff. So yes, it was a little complicated at certain points, but for the most part, a lot of it settled down into their own categories. So that's a bit of a myth. But we need to get into getting rid of the assholes and the bullshit, right? And often I think what is a myth in terms of the OSR and why we love the OSR is because one of the things that forced us into allowing us to game is to have, we were thrown into the lion's den of trying to create a good social structure amongst us, among us fantasy and science fiction and modernist creatives. And that is that it's not just about a player and a dungeon master, player and a game master. It wasn't a spoked system. It was a network system. So an example would be, the rules don't tell us how to string up a decoy, yell out some alien language, and cause the local monsters to hear it and run around the corner, and then trap them in a giant net and then cause a landslide or something like that. There are really no rules for that. But to collectively together, we would have a discussion. Now, there is a cycle in tabletop role-playing game that happens over and over and over again. And that is game master, dungeon master, storyteller, whatever the title is, warden, so many others. They describe a situation. Players describe how they deal with situation. We either use a randomizer if there's a chance of failure, or we describe how we deal with it, and then that cycle goes back to the game master. Oh, they give us a new situation based, for the most part, on the results of the last situation, and then that cycle continues. A new situation is described, players describe how they deal with it, and then we pass it back and forth. And it goes. It's a game of literary ping pong. Goes back and forth over and over and over again. And this discussion can be interrupted if the rules keep interrupting our gameplay. And oftentimes, if you have a very complex gaming system, that back and forth, that ping pong, gets disrupted with too many calls of fouls and distractions. And one of the worst things is for a player to try to override the game master in describing the end results of this back and forth that we're having. All right, guys, you walk into a room It's dusty and decrepit and hasn't seen the light of air in a, a millennium. What do you do? And then the players describe what they do. Oh, I walk further into the room with my torch, and the other players are, well, be careful. We're going to sit outside the door while you enter inside. And then someone says, well, I'm going to hand them my bag of marbles and allow them to use the marbles, roll them across the floor, just in case there's any traps or something. And then the game master says, okay, you, the one with the torch, I'm going to describe to you what you see, but the others do not see it, or whatever. And we just go back and forth and back and forth. And only until there's some sort of chance of success or failure that both all parties understand that, will they fall in a pit, won't they? Will they be able to lift up the grate? Will they be able to disarm the trap? Will they be able to parlay, negotiate, threaten? Will they be able to sneak or climb or swim? That's when we start to use the rules. And never before, and no need to do afterwards. And unfortunately, there's this idea that within the rules of the game, that players basically get to roll dice first, and then we just start describing what happens later. That's not necessarily the case. It's been an accepted practice, but no, it's about communication and talking back and forth. Now, thank you very much, Drew, for bringing up the descriptor of the fruitful void, in which we have a back and forth discussion. And yes, I have not forgotten, we're going to talk about bullshit and assholes. But one of those things is I'd like to bring up this design mechanism in a game known as Mothership. I don't have the articles right in front of me, but I'm bringing up Mothership, which is a new game, a horror. It is specifically a horror science fiction role-playing game that has been designed. And in this game, the designer specifically did not include rules for stealth. Yet, horror science fiction includes a lot of hiding and sneaking to get away from whatever horrors are out there in the deep void of space. Exactly why the game is called Mothership, because you kind of get it. You get Alien and Aliens and all the other science fiction horror that has ever, Lovecraftian horror that has ever existed out there, kind of makes you think about this game. And the designers specified why they didn't want to have stealth rules. And their contention was they didn't want that part of the game to be easily resolved by a die roll. They wanted to have a back and forth discussion to take place to increase the tension, to stretch out those moments. And when we start having discussions in the OSR, we're stretching out a moment that might even be the blink of an eye. But instead of going to being top-headed and looking for our character sheets and our rules and rolling some dice, we're having a back and forth discussion. And so in the article that the creators of Mothership talked about is, listen, you want to hide in a air duct in a abandoned starship? Well, you're wearing a spacesuit. Can you fit into the air duct? Do you hear the sounds of the claws against the bulkhead as the released bioengineered monster is stalking around the ship? Can you hear its breathing? Maybe there's flickering lights. Do you have to take off your spacesuit to hide into the air ducts? What do you do with your spacesuit? Maybe it can smell you. Maybe the players have discovered that it can find heat signatures and they want to hide near the nitrogen tanks or something. And that back and forth is how we adjudicate some of the successes and the failures, and being creative and not allowing the rules to intercede. Now we get into the BS and the assholes, okay? Oftentimes what you hear from modern gamers, and I understand this, is that, well, if there's no rules that tell me whether I can succeed or fail, if there's no rule that lets me do this thing, then it's just willy-nilly, and it's not. Because the dissemination of of our agreement is very much like actors in improv. What is your relationship with the game, the narrative, the creative space, and all of the people involved? Are you someone who is willing to negotiate? Are you a collaborator in creating this world, this structure, this house that we're building? Are you going to be one of the pillars, the foundational uh, members that's going to hold this up? Or are you going to be someone who wants to disrupt this meal, this recipe that we're creating? I'm trying to come up with all kinds of different analogies here, right? Sometimes a great sports player, and pick your favorite sport. Sometimes there are people who are gifted, yet you wonder why teams don't like that person, because they don't work well, they don't synergize with a team. And some of our greatest media, when it comes to acting, in television and movies and things, some of our greatest comic book and graphic novels have been created because of great artists and inkers and writers, and it's because they synergize together. If you're not someone, and back in the OSR or old Grognard days, man, if you couldn't get along, people didn't like you. If you were the person who wanted to steal the spotlight, who argued every rule and ruling, who tried to, I say, game the system by trying to game us as individuals, someone who was unwilling to negotiate, someone who was unwilling to give up something to gain a thing. A good example of this would be, and we'll probably talk about this tomorrow, a good example are Dungeons and Dragons spells, right? Today, you can look up a Dungeons and Dragons spell, and it's like a half-page thing that tells you all the rules and restrictions. Yet, we have a new game known as Knave by Ben Milton from Questing Beast, and he's got a page of 100 different spells, one line. That's it. Hey, this spell allows you to float an object, or this spell with a touch of your hand turns a solid object into jello, or something silly like that, right? And there's no descriptions. Like an example would be, I'm going to make up a spell, like Pass Wall. Hey, if you touch a stone object or stone wall, you can open up a small opening in that stone. And what is the description of small? What does small mean? And then we start having a discussion, and there's a give and take. Maybe the dungeon master is like, well, wait a minute. Small to me is like an opening you could reach your hand in, and the player goes, "Oh, I was hoping maybe it would be an opening big enough just to crawl through." And then we may have a discussion and go, "Okay, well, it's big enough for the smallest members of the group, like the gnome and the halfling, but for you human-sized people and larger, you're going to need to apply this, in a greater effect." And then maybe the spellcaster's like, "Oh, well, if I concentrated on this spell more, could I increase the size of it?" And then we start having this open discussion. And then once that discussion happens, that ruling becomes a rule. Oh no, we all agree, hey, if the wizard places their hand against the stone wall, the longer they concentrate on it, the bigger the opening becomes. Great, we've just discussed it. It becomes concrete, we move on. A lot of games that are rules light in this manner operate this way. Fate is one. We don't really hear too much about Fate now, but Fate was a game where we just had things known as aspects, and you would write an aspect on your character. I'm an elf. Well, can we all agree on what an elf is in this world? And we can be very stereotyped with it. Oh, we've got pointy ears and a narrow frame, and then we come up with, well, what are elves? Do they have that proverbial dark vision? Do they have the meditative sleep? Maybe, or maybe these elves are more fey-like, and we have a discussion, and then that becomes the rule. And in a group of people, of players and game masters, we're here to play, to find out. And when we all agree on what that ruling is, that becomes the new rule. And that means that you as an individual must accommodate all the other personalities within that group. And so if you're someone who's an asshole, you will not fit into that category at all. Believe you me, as a person, I am not an actor, but for those who have been involved in improv and um, comedy or other creative endeavors when it comes to writing and you having to work with other people, you absolutely positively have to have open within you the ability to say, okay, I don't really need to hold so tight to these 90% of things, but this 10%, I really feel like we need to, like, this is really important to me. Expressing that to everyone else, having people accommodate what your desire is, releasing those clawed hands on the thing you won't, that you feel is so important, and releasing it into the world and letting other people play with those and using your creativity as building blocks for everyone else. I think oftentimes when there are those who don't like the idea of the game master asking the players, okay, you walk into the tavern, you tell me what you see. Because some people feel like, well, that's not really exploration, because if I'm telling you what I see, that sounds like you haven't made up your mind what's there, and then I don't get to see what's creative. But here's the thing. Everybody else at the table is the collaborator as well. You don't know what the other people are going to describe. You don't know what the other individuals there are going to add to the scenes or add into the story, and those other individuals become the randomizer. Technically, the people you're playing with are the dice. They are the randomizer that may happen. When one little technique, I didn't create this, but a friend of mine created this, and we would make up NPCs, and someone would come up with a look, someone would come up with a personality, and someone else would come up with like a background or like a twist and a name, and then we would just put it all together. So like we'd come to the table with like 3x5 or 5x8 cards, and we would just write down stuff like say, all right guys, this is long before we had the internet, that where you could just click a button and get some randomized names, but we just use cards and write down like a bunch of random names, like about a good 5 or 6 names, a good 5 or 6 like physical descriptions, like, oh, a pudgy halfling, a very tall lanky half orc or something, a tiefling with a golden scales tinged with a little bit of bronze or something, right? We will write all this down, and then the game master will say, okay, you give me a name, you give me a description, you give me a personality, you give me a twist or a trait or a profession or something, and then we would just make it up. And of course, one person, yes, will come up with the name, but they don't know what this person is going to look like or what their personality is or how they fit into it. And so all of us as collaborators become the dice. Now, there are some players that are the bullshitters, okay? And what I mean by that is some players want to succeed by twisting to the narrative, like trying to wring out a damp towel or cloth, to the point where the rest of us start rolling our eyes. And sometimes bullshitters can be daunting, and this is at the point where rules light systems can really point these people out, because at a certain point we have to understand that it's not about whether you're right and everyone else is wrong. There's something else going on. You're stealing other people's time. Listen, we need to move on. We can't sit around while you describe how it is that there are people who can alchemists that well, really there was a historical fact of alchemy and black powder back in the 800 AD and blah blah blah, and this person's going on and on and on. The game, if you are the if you're the sand in the very well-oiled system, you are, yeah, it's just BS. It's going to BS, right? It's more than just I'm right. It's you have to look around and be socially attuned that you're wasting people's time, you're stealing the spotlight, you are grinding to a halt the engine of the back and forth. Scenario, descriptor, result. Scenario, description, result. Scenario, and you want that locomotive, and you want that heartbeat moving. Scenario, description, result. Scenario, description, result. And yes, can we stretch out those moments? Of course we can. Can we stretch out like Mothership? Can we stretch out the I'm gonna hide? Here's a classic one we've seen in the movies and television. Bad guys burst into room. They see window open and curtains flowing in air. Bad guys go, ooh, the person I'm looking for, the protagonists have jumped through the window. All right, you guys, I'm going to look out the window. You guys go down the hall. We need to find them. Bad guy looks out window, looks around, doesn't see anyone. They leave. And what happens with our hero? Our hero never went out the window. They hid in the closet, or they hid in a duct, or they went out the window, but they climbed upward and they're flat against the wall, or whatever. They're dangling by their fingertips or something. And that only happens when we have a back and forth. Can you make die rolls to assert like hiding and stealth? Yes, but it can be very quick. We roll the dice to see, did you succeed or fail? Okay, you failed. The guards see you. Okay, they go after you. But if we have a back and forth, I'm going to make it look like I went out the window, but then I'm going to hide under the bed or hide in the closet, and I'm going to, hold my hands over my mouth so that they don't hear my heavy breathing because I'm so scared, and blah, blah, blah. And we have some fun with that. Some players are going to, if they do that a little too much, if they try to overtalk the more quiet players, if they try to intimidate through social influence, a game master who might be a little timid or a little nervous about running a system, those are the people who are BSers. Those are assholes. And there isn't a rule set available that's going to stop you and stop people that are assholes. That's just who they're going to be. Yes, there are game systems where the rules, how do I say this? The rules are a shield against those people, and that only works temporarily. Because at a certain point, the rules end up having to be so robust that you end up needing to write down every side moment because there are people who just want to exploit the rules. And those exploiters are easily found in the OSR. Easy. If you're just rolling a die and, hey, guess what? You're going to roll a d20 and roll equal to or below your statistic. Great. That's the rule. That's what we're going to use. And we're going to use your classic six stats, right? The 3 physical, the 3 mental, strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. We're going to use those. There's not much space for a BSer or an asshole to hide behind, right? And that means that when they start trying to circumvent the rules by describing a thing to make their success, and the game master goes, great, I understand what you're trying to say, I understand what you're trying to do, but we're under tension. If you didn't have any tension, no big deal. But there's time, energy, and resources that need to be burned to get you to succeed. Roll the dice. Now we're going to figure it out. And that player may be like, well, see, because in the real world, there are people who can do these things and blah, blah, blah. And we're all sitting back, like shaking our heads like, this is the 3rd time you brought this up, dude. Quit it. And this means that in a social structure, amongst not just you and the game master, but you, the game master, and all the other players, you have to have some sort of synergy. And you know. Yeah, I mean, are a vast majority of us in the tabletop role playing community, are we socially awkward? Are we still trying to find ourselves outside the game, let alone having to socialize within the game? Yeah, it's it's a little bit of a strange dichotomy that one of the most social, one of probably like the top 10 most social uh, endeavors that we can engage in involves people who don't have very good social skills. Yeah, yeah. Maybe that's kind of our fault, but we get thrown in the deep end, learn to swim, and realize that, like, you know what, it's not that serious. Just roll the dice and keep going. Which this also means that when it comes to rules exploits, like rules lawyering, power gaming, things like that, when you can write a character sheet on a bunch of 3x5 cards, there's not much space you can hide hide all your shenanigans. When you have a Google Doc of 5,000 words just to describe your character sheet, it's easy to hide things in there, especially like your players who like to craft things on their own and find little exploits because there's a third rule set book that came out with an errata that fixed a thing, but you end up realizing that they didn't, but it conflicts with this other thing that allows you to quadruple the damage your character can do. It's very difficult to find all that and memorize all that and understand how it's going to work at your gaming table. But when you're playing Knave, ICRPG, OSE, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, Swords and Sorcery, so on and so forth, when you're playing these rules light games, heck, Shadow Dark is a big one right now, and you've got like 6 lines of text written on the back of a napkin, and it's easy for someone else next to you to look over your shoulder and go, where'd you get that +5 bonus from? Because it's sticking out like a sore thumb. And the player's like, well, see, yeah, you can't lie by cheating, or at least trying to modify your success by rules as written rather than rules as intended. There's a lot of that. Yeah, like Z says, well, isn't that the job of the DM to be the official referee, Mr. Referee? Yeah, to know the rules, to reason, enforce them, and force players to stay within their bounds, and create as needed to enforce those boundaries. Well, I think this is a different subject, Z, because you bring this up. For some weird reason, we have relegated the DM. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm getting a little verklempt in here, but I don't understand why we've accepted that the dungeon master, the game master, also has to be a psychologist, right? Like, if you're a player and there's bullshit happening at your table, speak the hell up. It's not just the DM's fault to juggle all of the personalities and they're the ones that no. Players, you can stop yourself from stealing the spotlight and saying, hey, listen, why don't you move on to this other player? You can raise your hand and be like, hey, listen, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but so and so, you need to calm the hell down, because it's not all about you, it's about the rest of us, right? Our job as players is to, at a minimum, not get in the way of the fun and the joy of anyone else, at a minimum, let alone be an engine for creativity and expression for everybody else. So, and you only have so many characters to write, so I get it. So I'm saying this more holistically, not picking with you at all. But yeah, if you're going to sit down at a table and you're going to agree as a player that the dungeon master's referee, then you have to accept the referee's rules and rulings. If you're playing with people you don't trust, what are you doing? Like, that's a bigger issue. Like, why are you even hanging around people you don't trust at all? That makes zero sense. I'm gonna let that hang out there. If you're playing a game where you need the rules because you think the people you're playing with you can't trust, that's an issue. That's a social issue that goes beyond the gaming. Why are you even socializing with people you can't trust? Especially, sorry, these are games. They're insignificant when it comes to the wider world. That you have to worry about people cheating. That's that that says more about you, or when I say you, the other people you are associating with, as well as yourself if you're one of these people that likes to cheat. It says more about you and your personality than it says about anything about a game. It's just like the idea of rolling out in front, and how some people, or I mean, in us olden days, we used to hide rolls all the time. We never worried about it. Game master rolls behind their how did I forget the name of it? The DM screen. We didn't care. As a matter of fact, there were certain not rules. There were certain roles in the gaming community where, when they were incepted into the game master would roll instead of you. And there were some games back in like the late 80s, early 90s that actually had the game master making all of the rolls for your player character. I know some people, you say that to some people and it's like, I can't believe you would do that, right? But yeah. Now, one easy way to get around the rolling hidden roll kind of thing, get yourself a something like a cup, like a dice rolling cup, one of those like fake leathery kind of things with the dice in it. Roll the dice in it, and then keep them hidden, and then do the ping pong, the situation, we're given a situation, we describe how we deal with it, we find out what the results are, and we do that circle, situation, narrative, result, situation, narrative, result, and then we expose the dice to find out, and then we can all be surprised and kind of stretch out some of those moments that are like where we want to see them and have them really intense and stuff. So yeah, Z says, I wholly agree. If you cannot trust your team, then don't be in it. Yeah, exactly. Especially if you don't trust a leader. That's so bizarre. Yeah, especially if you don't trust the leader of that team. Koval is right. No D&D is better than bad D&D. I agree. Yep. And Drew says, no hidden rolls at my table. I don't like the hide a roll at all. Anyway, I leave it out there in the open, and then we all just accept what it is. I still have a problem with the band-aids that are put on games to avoid death, because we don't want to have the discussion of whether we want to have death in our game or not. And you guys know my description. Death narratively is not the same thing as not being able to play. And if your character is removed from the game, your character can easily be removed from games where there is no death. I point out Kids on Bikes and Tales from the Loop and Things from the Flood, where you play children that can't die in the game, but you sure can be suspended or grounded, or your parents can move. And it's the same thing as your character, like, aging out and going to college. It's your character's dead. You can't play the character anymore. So yeah, and that happens with like rolls out on the when you roll dice and you roll them in front of everybody. I think that's awesome. Hey, however the dice may lay, which is why the OSR is. It's like you want to avoid rolling dice. That is part of the game, is to avoid rolling dice. Don't roll the dice. Let's have a discussion, because the minute those dice hit the table, everyone knows, like, oh no. Here we go. I've got 7 hit points and you're rolling a d10. There's a good chance I'm dead. Right? There's a higher probability of that death happening every time you roll the dice. Why bother rolling the dice when we can just have a discussion, please? And also sometimes, many times, there really is no reason to roll the dice. If there's no, if there's no time, you guys know my thing, my little tersiness. No time, no energy, no resources, no social clout being expressed, no economics involved in it. Then don't even bother rolling the dice, right? So that's a great idea. For games that use the same type and number of dice, consistently pre-roll, then reveal after PC action is taken. We've played that before, especially when we did so here's a weird conundrum. Surprise rolls. So if I ask players to roll their, let's use 5th edition. So, hey, make a perception check. The minute you say that, it takes the surprise away. But if you take some 3x5 cards and all the players, you pre-roll all of your not unconscious, your tertiary die rolls. I don't know about you guys, but Namor's Speedo is like oddly, I don't know, it's something about it's so funny. This standy. Anyway, it just, I don't know, some reason it just bothered me for a little bit. I'm just like, dude, put some clothes on. Anyway, the we used to have surprise rolls in way back in Dungeons and Dragons. You'd roll D6s, I think, at the time for BX, D&D, and whatnot. And the minute you ask for a roll, that automatically alerts the players that there's something wrong, which means that technically they're automatically succeeding on a roll even if they fail, because another player can always say, well, I want to make my perception check, blah, blah, blah. Which is why there are, why they call it passive perception, even though 99.9% of all role-playing games, you can always run them with passive rolls by just, I describe it as player character professionalism, that players are good at the thing that they do. You don't need to roll the dice. Does the roguish thief go into the town market and see the pickpocketing kids? Of course they do. I'm not going to make them roll that because yes, of course they see it. Does the holy knight that approaches the religious forum and understand that there's a tension involved because one or more members of the holy order are being judged based on their actions over the last campaign against the evil goblinoids or something? I'm not making you roll. I don't care that your intelligence is 8. Whatever, you know this. This is part of your character. Yes, cleric, yes, you do understand what's going on. Hey, wizard, yes, the books are out of order and someone went through your library or something. You're not rolling for that. So funny. It's quite bulging today. Reminds me of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure scene. Yeah, it is. Look at your little. Okay, let's see if we can move the microphone in the. That's not helping, is it? That is not helping. Oh man, Drew says I have thrown out rolls for perception, insight, initiative, and all that nonsense that is just slowing the game down to lead to unnecessary frustrations. You listen. There's a reason why games, and I know it sounds strange, but especially if you, it's going to take me a little bit to find it, but there was a podcast and, Mothership Creator podcast, and then it was transcribed and talking about the fact of not having die rolls for things in games. And Drew, you make a good point. There are plenty of games that are specifically designed that don't have perception, insight, initiative. Daggerheart, the community was in an uproar when Daggerheart, the game created by the Critical Role community, community, players wanted to have a game without initiative. And you would have thought, no initiative, you would have thought that they took a D20 and like melted it with a flamethrower, in a public square or something. Like, how dare you get rid of that? Calm down, because maybe, just maybe, the panic is that the rules that we're thinking about already exist amongst all of us having a conversation as we're speaking right now. Sometimes, just sometimes, you don't need an initiative roll because somebody is more prepared than someone else. That's it. Or dare I say, the game master, dungeon master, storyteller, flame tender has a situation involved in which, unfortunately, yes, players, you're not prepared for. Maybe a trap needs to be sprung on you, and the game master, the dungeon master, is saying, no, players, this person is smarter, more prepared, and has the upper hand in this particular situation, and there's nothing you can do about it. And giving that power and taking that power away from the dungeon master takes away the tension in creating more and more tense situations. Remember that cycle. Create the situation, players describe how to deal with the situation, we describe the fallout, and then that cycle continues. And I think taking that power away from the game master, dungeon master, because you don't trust them is horrible. Z says, I love giving out information based on background, class, and ability skill scores as either locked information or automatic successes. I do that all the time. Yeah, it makes those characters' creation choices matter. Exactly, right? Like, and also it how do I explain this? It's an immersive tool. If we don't even roll the dice, we just keep moving. So I don't even mention passive skills at all. And I know exactly what you're saying, Z. A lot of times we don't even mention it. It's just hey, you walk into the room and, all right, Gregorio, the barbaric character or something, you can smell blood in the air. There was a great battle, but you see no bodies. But the hairs rise on the back of your neck. I'm not making you roll for that. Of course your character senses that, because that's your character. It's the Wolverine effect, right? The Marvel character Wolverine with the claws and stuff. It's like Wolverine comes into a thing and he senses something's wrong. But how many times has his brother Sabretooth snuck up on him? All the time, right? Because that's part of the story is, yeah, Wolverine senses all the danger except when he doesn't. Right? Spider-Man's Spidey senses danger until he doesn't. And when you take that power away from the person who's creating the story in the first place for you guys to get into it, the situations, yeah, I think that's horrible. Z says, for example, if you are a fighter of a decent level, you can tell the easy ambush spots. Yep. And therefore are alerted to where one will happen, and should one happen, you are not surprised. Exactly. Hey, if it's the classic counter sniper situation. Well, if I were going to set up an ambush, I would hide to the ridge up on the left in the hill or down below, or I would have people. We've seen this in spy movies, right? The person sits down in a cafe in some exotic location and goes, oh, I know where all of your guards or something at. The two at the left by the light post, the one, pushing the baby carriage and blah, 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 right? Yeah. He says, or if you are a librarian, you don't roll research to find a book, even a rare one. You know if it's there or not within 10 minutes. Exactly. Right? And who's to say that your character isn't the wizard was a small urchin child that ran the streets, went into a wizard's tower, and became an apprentice. But maybe we've never really talked about the wizard's background until they go back into the town square, the bazaar, where they have a open fair and there's like a flea market or something, and the wizard, who isn't a thieving type but remembers that from their past, and it could be a background, it maybe it's just a character choice or whatever, and they remember this, and therefore they notice the pickpocketing kids, right? And that's just a part of incorporating that character's background, capital B or small b, into the game. And so if a character used to be a farmer or a blacksmith or whatever, those people that make ink, or a Wainwright or something like that, maybe they notice that someone sabotaged the wheels of the wagons or whatever. I don't know. This also helps with rule exploration, because there is no rule to exploit. Yep, exactly. And that's the thing about the BS detectors and a-holes, is that if there's no rule to exploit, you can't exploit the rule. The rule is us, which means you're trying to exploit us. And most people you game with we're pretty attentive, and we can tell, oh, you're one of those people. Oh, you're the one that wants to always be right and be expert at everything all the time, always. Oh, okay, you're one of those. Okay, I get it. Yeah. Yep. If there's no rule to exploit, it's difficult to do that. And really, what ends up happening is that person. It's possible, and this is why role-playing games have been embraced by non-gamers, meaning like the idea of playing a role is used in psychology and family therapy and couples therapy and things like that, because we put ourselves in someone else's shoes. And if you are someone who has a very low level of empathy, sympathy, of low level of being able to play someone else's role, we see this in our own lives, right? The political rhetoric of people hating each other across they can't across the aisle. They can't see themselves in the other person's shoes. They can't see themselves. If I were this other person, how would I feel being treated, being not having humanity, by dehumanizing the other person, by seeing it from their point of view. And heck, right now we're going through like the whole, dehumanizing people because of immigration and things like that. And like, and so we go into all kinds of very, very dangerous political territory about being in the shoes of the other person. And when you have someone who's trying to exploit rules in a role-playing game, it can feel a little personal, because you're trying to exploit another human being. And it's very easy to detect that when you're playing with someone and you're the dungeon master, and you give the ruling, hey, at this very moment, you cannot do this thing. Maybe if you try something else, and the player for the third, fourth, fifth time is like, no. This is really how it should work, because back in the day, they're well, actually, and they do this over and over again, and it's not just the dungeon master's job. The other players can stop and say, oh, yo, listen, you need to cut the shit out, right? Like right now, like hold it till the end of the game, and have enough social savvy to understand, yes, you might be butthurt about something, but it's not about you. Hold on to that. Wait till the end of the game. Have a discussion. Maybe we can retcon something. Maybe we could come up to a rules adjudication. Maybe one other player says, yeah, you know what? In hindsight, I guess I do see it the way you do see it. Okay, how about we make amends by doing this other thing? And now mind you, there are games that have rules for not having the rule. I bring up an example would be Cypher System. I'm gonna leave this up here. Cypher System has a GM intrusion, and so Monty Cook introduced a GM intrusion, and a GM intrusion is is a rule for not having a rule. In other words, the rule is the game master can intrude and place your characters in a more tense, dramatic situation, and in return, you're given a Benny. You're given it's an experience point, but you can spend those for successes and things like that to maybe even get yourself out of that situation. So, a game master could say, the ceiling is collapsing, the guards come around the corner, a net falls over top of you, your hyperdrive fails and doesn't work. I'm looking at you, Star Wars and Millennium Falcon, right? It's the I'm going to make your life harder, and with the GM intrusion, because I'm making your life harder, here's a little extra, just because you can agree to take it. If you take it, okay. Devil's Bargain is another one from Blades in the Dark, which is another rule for not having a rule. It is I'll give you some more dice, but let's come up with a situation. What's the bargain you're willing to give? What's the downside for agreeing to making your life more complicated, for inserting this new thing into the game where we don't really have a rule? It's kind of fuzzy, but we're all agreeing that we're on the same page. And Devil's Bargains, deals with the devil, GM intrusions, those give and takes have always existed, and those are ways in which we can steal them from a million other games, introduce them into the game to maybe smooth over some of the hurt feelings that may happen when a game master goes, well, you succeeded, but I'm still going to make your life hard. And that's one of a number of things that have happened that exist in indie games and rules like games that say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to make this a 300-page tome. Here's what I'm going to do. In Runehammer ICRPG, he puts a D4 in there. Roll a D4, and in that many rounds, life turns bad. That's the rule. Okay, now how does it turn that way? What happens? We don't know. That's up to you guys in the game. Do we all accept the fact that you rolled a 3 on a D4, and in a third round of activity, the situation gets worse? Yeah, we all agree to it because that's a rule we agree to in this game. Great, okay, and then move on from there. Drew says, in a sense, in a game that is about immersion, one could say it is about them. Yeah, I agree. But I agree with you. The people who are in actually mode are clearly not interested in immersion. Exactly. I do. We can argue about immersion too, because I hear people use that as an excuse to not engage in certain aspects of a game because, it breaks the immersion. And I'm going, wait a minute, but people constantly look at their character sheets, roll dice, use computerized systems and things like all the rest of that stuff is immersion breaking. It more or less sounds like either it's a rule you just don't want to use, which is, I don't know why people just don't say I just don't want to use it, or it is something that runs counter to the success of a player that wants to exploit something in the game. And so yeah. Some people get into a actually mode because they just don't want to be wrong. And if we ignore the game, we all have social problems. We are not only are there things lacking many times in our own lives, but we are all neurodivergent on some level all the time. We are all on the spectrum. Are there times where where internally we don't see what externally everyone else is seeing? Yes. There are many times where a player is so immersed in what their character is doing, they don't understand it has been 45 minutes of them keeping everyone else out of the realm of it. Does that mean we have to get pulled back a little bit? Sure. Does that mean that, hey, you need a tap on the shoulder to listen, calm down. There's other people at the table. We'll come back to you when you're done, right? Yeah, I mean, it's role-playing games can kind of bring out the the deepest parts of us for good or bad, sometimes for bad, and it's a little difficult to navigate that. I don't think that isn't the job of the dungeon master. That's the job of everybody at the table. To all of us look at ourselves, take a deep breath, relax, not about you. To give like I said, as a player, to give ourselves enough space to at least allow the freedom for everybody else to enjoy the game equally and positively and not intrude on their fun. And so, yeah, rules light systems aren't necessarily less complex. The complexity comes in dealing with the personalities at the table. Now, I understand that if you don't know the people, if it's your first few times gaming, or people are busy, you don't get to game with them as often as you'd like, so our social synergy isn't really where we'd like it to be, and that can be an issue too. A little rocky sometimes, sure, but if you come into these games, especially rules light games, with an open mind and understand it, and like me, I'm zen. I'm like, cool, whatever your game is about, I'm down. I don't care whether I wouldn't run it the same way. It's not about me. It's about me enjoying the game with you and your creativity and everyone else, and then I'll just fill in the gaps, right? And some people aren't like that. Some people are like, I'm playing a Star Wars Jedi and I don't care what the rules are. And, some people come into it because they are historians or lore fanatics, or they know all the canon and they just want to get into their actually phase. It's like, stay relaxed, calm down, So definitely agree. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for being part of the show. Thank you very much for putting up with the fact that I screwed up something that I shouldn't have. I mean, it made sense, right? Because I was trying to. So my it's hard to describe it. There's a whole big thing with security, and the VPN is switching over, and then it made an alert, because then you're not coming from your own IP address, in which case it sets off the. Anyway, I don't want to get into it because it was horrible, because I had to unplug stuff and reboot, and yeah. Drew says, towards the end of today's video, I think I can ask the real question: what can be done to DBJ because we're active on Discord? Yes, if I had more of a personal life. Well, either that, or give me about 3.5 years and I'll be there. Because I'm retiring. I have my date set for retirement. This old grognard, yes, has a regular full-time job, 32 years. I got 3 years. It's actually 3.5. But the end of 2027, first day of 2028, I'm out. So yeah, I really wish I could. I wish I was more like you younger folk out there. But I don't have a job. I'm constantly driving and walking on my job, so I don't have the ability to. And I'm GPSed as well. So if I stop to engage in a thing, then I either have to stop and want to be engaged in that thing, in which case, not only am I not moving from my GPS, but I'm also not working, and I'm also out in the public, or I'm like partially halfway involved in it. I don't know. Maybe there's a way. Let me see. I wonder if I could. Who's said? Yeah. Well, the whole point was that it stopped my it shut down my internet activity. Well, it was intermediate, because it shut down mine because I wasn't able to log in, because I was coming from an unknown IP address, which was conflicting with my McAfee, and then we also have Norton, and then my wife's job has a VPN, which it didn't change. They just increased the security. So it was a whole thing. Anyway, we cleared it up. It's fine. It's fine. I hate Norton. Norton is the worst. Oh my God. I don't know why we have two different ones, but but if you can get one for free, so. But anyway, I didn't mean to go off on that kind of tangent. Anyway, I like talking about old school, new school games and some of the intricacies. I tend to get away from some of the deeper, more philosophical things because some people play games and it's not really supposed to be that deep for them. But there's a big push to go backwards and going meaning going backwards, meaning like old school gaming and why that is. And I just thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about that. Like, really, like, why are people doing this? Like, why are rules like games? Now, mind you, rules like games can seem like they're real easy to write as well. So if you want to be a publisher or you have your own game, you have your own rule system, I would just say that you probably want a strong engine rather than a rules light system. I think you could make a differentiation because if you have a strong engine, you can write for it very intensely. Blades in the Dark has a very robust engine, but it's not rules light. It's a pretty thick book. If you get into it, there's a lot of moving parts, but it only uses between 1 and 4 d6, and that's it. And you don't even add the dice together. You're just trying to get your highest result. That's it. Now, what happens with that, it might push you into a different category. Like if your character gets arrested, they have a whole rule system for being incarcerated. They have a whole rule system on increasing heat from the authorities. There's a whole rule system in Blades in the Dark for dealing with other gangs and downtime and things like that. So it's not necessarily rules light, but it has a robust engine. And I think most people understand Dungeons and Dragons doesn't really need a 350-page rulebook for it. It's basically a D20 plus or minus a modifier, and then there's a whole bunch of extraneous stuff that's attached to it. So, yeah, Drew says, I would say my system is rules light. It still will have a few hundred pages. Exactly. I don't think there needs to be a differentiation between the two, but I think there's a myth of it, is basically what I'm saying, right? Heck, Fate, Powered by the Apocalypse is simple as shit. You roll 2d6 and that's it, and use a bell curve system. That's all it is, and it's extremely expansive. So, yeah, there's plenty of games out there, and there's other games as well that are more detailed. Not Ten Candles. Dread is another one that's like that. Heck, even Call of Cthulhu. If you think about it, all Call of Cthulhu is a percentile system. Roll percentage and roll equal to or under your percentage. It's the exact same thing, right? And those thousands, maybe tens of thousands of pages have been written about Call of Cthulhu, and it's pretty simple. So, but anyway, guys, I'm not holding you any longer. Thank you very much for being part of the show. You can tell I'm coming down with a little bit of something. I don't know why. One of those hay fever, summer colds or whatever. I don't know why. But anyway, thank you very much for being part of the show. And thank you for letting me bring up some of these subjects. We get a little squirrely towards the end. I love it because it also means that we're also, it creates that creative spark, which I love. And hopefully you guys can feed off of that too. And so, guys, have a great one. Thank you very much for being part of the show. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for giving me some of my dead space as well. Yeah. Drew says, technically 2 dice do not give a curve, but I get what you're saying. Even though, well, actually, it is inaccurate. It's more probabilities. Two dice added together give a curve. And then you can modify the curve. I think that's how Powered by the Apocalypse does it. It's like 2 to 6, 7 to 9, 10 to 12. It's the curve. So 2 to 6 is a wider probability range than the 10 to 12, and then 7 to 9 is more common. And then with very, very small modifiers, plus and minus maximum plus and minus 1 to 2 um, pushes you in that curve, because even the MCDM role playing game is using the 2d12 curve as well. So, yeah, so I think that's more. I think I'm inaccurately calling it. I know I'm conflating probabilities and bell curves and things like that, because I am not a mathematician in the slightest bit. But I do understand that adjusting those ranges can get you desired outcomes that you'd like for your game. And now mind you, this whole channel's dedicated to dice rolls and things like that. Don't come here for that, and don't come to me because I'll give you the wrong information. But those are some fun things to do. I wish I could bring someone on or talk to somebody about those things, because we've had games. I can't pick one off the top of my head, but I know there have been people who've played games like GURPS does this with its 3d6 system, where you expect outcomes, but the outcomes aren't those that are expected from the game, because like GURPS is pretty damn lethal. And yeah, no, it's not a bell curve, but that is maybe more math than most people can enjoy. Yeah. No, I'm not. You are far more right than I am. Yeah, there's a lot of math involved in it and stuff like that. And also, with me not being a mathematician, there's also feeling. Sometimes dice systems can give us a feeling of a thing, and which can be undersold for those people who are very much into the maths, and probably rubs them the wrong way, because the maths don't math right in some game systems, but the people feel the thing more than the math makes it really come about. I know it's kind of really weird to say. Plus, we're as human beings, right? Sometimes we do wrong things. Yeah, Drew. And sometimes I think we as human beings also misinterpret probabilities as well. Like a movie might have Rotten Tomatoes score of like 87%, and they're like, most people like the movie 87%, and someone will say, well, that can't be true because I didn't like it. And it's like, no, both are true. The reason you didn't like it is because you didn't fall into the 87 percentile. And most people don't think of things that way, right? Like if something happens most often than not, they think it's actually 100%. So when the thing doesn't happen the way they want it to, they think something's wrong. But no, yeah, it's like being struck by lightning. People can get struck by lightning. It happens. The fact that someone got struck by lightning doesn't make it impossible. It just makes it unlikely. Which is why we call it getting struck by lightning. Anyway, guys, have a great one. I'm going to let you guys go. We'll talk about these things tomorrow, maybe. Peace and tranquility.